0 people on the ground and we can't even get our story straight is not a good sign. We're in day 3 of this thing and it's a total mess. Okay, and anyone who's being honest has got to admit that it's a total mess. And the hypocrisy is obvious because if he says it's about law enforcement, then why are the ships still there? Because we already got the guy. And if he says it's about oil, well, we don't use our military to grab oil from countries. We don't use our military to settle disputes. And by the way, it's not our oil. It's their oil. Okay, it's the Venezuelans' oil. And if they violated a contract, then that's not what the U.S. military is for.
Let me just
so it's kind of a disaster, to be honest.
Let me play a little bit more of Trump, because, I mean, this is part of a pattern of Trump really not taking anything off the table, even while his aides might be trying to do that on the side over there. Here's what he said on Sunday about whether he's willing to put boots on the ground again in Venezuela.
I always say boots on the ground. Oh, so we're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually. We're not afraid of it. We don't mind saying it, but we're going to make sure that that country is run properly.
Batya, I just wonder, first of all, A, how is he going to make sure that the country is, quote unquote, run properly? And B, is that now on the table, boots on the ground in Venezuela again, beyond just the operation to get Maduro out?
It's very funny to me because it seems like you guys are acting like because a simple operation that was very successful could have accomplished many goals, therefore it couldn't have accomplished any of them. I say this with all due respect, sir. I'm so grateful to you for the service you've provided to this country. But Venezuela is not Afghanistan. 25 years ago, there was a functioning democracy there. It's just apples and oranges to compare it. There is no way Donald Trump is going to put boots on the ground there. That's what the ships are there for, to not have to do that. What they're doing right now is beyond brilliant, because instead of rushing in and appointing Maria Machado, for example, they're saying, let's wait and see where the Venezuelan people are at. Let's wait until we can have an election. You can't just do that overnight. And so they are sitting there and watching and calibrating and making sure, by the way, that the Venezuelan people, as well as now the new president, understand that whatever they do, this better be good for the United States, because we're not afraid to use our power anymore.
Trump doesn't care what the Venezuelan people think.
We actually had an election, they had an election in Venezuela, so that's a moot talking point. And let's just tick down the list real quick so we're very clear about it. This isn't about drugs, because the President of the United States, he just pardoned Juan Hernandez, who was convicted by an American jury, who's the former president of Honduras, okay? He was indicted and convicted by an American jury, and he was convicted of moving over 400 tons of cocaine into the United States of America. And the president said, go free, my brother, go free. So that's not about drugs. It's not necessarily about regime change either. I think people are missing the mark, because Maduro's entire team is still there. His military is still there. It's his vice president. So it's not about freeing Venezuelans, because if you wanted to do that, then you actually would put in a new government. You would install a new government. Or better yet, you would install the opposition leader, which he chose not to do. This is about one thing and one thing only, which is why your comparison is accurate and it strikes a chord with the American people. This is about oil. This is about oil and dollars. And I'm tired of the president of the United States. He chooses Caracas over rural health hospitals, right? He chooses Venezuelans over soybean farmers.
So,
he chooses everybody else over Americans.
Did you oppose the Biden administration putting a bounty on Maduro's head as well?
No, Maduro's a horrible person. He needs to be shackled.
But what is
so Trump just acted on it.
Exactly. What do you mean that you approve of Biden putting the bounty on his head, but not of Trump actually going out and arresting the guy?
There are vastly, those are diametrically opposed. First of all, I don't think anybody here is trumpeting that Maduro's a great person. If you are, raise your hand. See, the table is silent. So that's first. He's oppressive. He deserves to be behind bars. I'm not arguing that point. But what I am arguing is that what we did was ill-advised on the global scale. There are other ways to go about doing that. And I am tired of America, just like many people on the left and the right, believing that we can go in and just implement our free will, utilize resources, utilize American troops, implement regime change or whatever it may be, and now we're doing it over and over again for oil. Don't lie to me.
No troops suffered as a result of this operation.
No, several troops were injured, first of all. Many troops were injured.
American troops were injured. All in all, unscathed.
They were injured.
What this is, it's not about oil, to your point.
Many U.S. troops were injured.
That's a side story. Although I do find it rich that progressives keep saying that this insinuation that we're going to seize their oil, because I didn't hear
what Trump said.
I bristle, by the way. I didn't hear a peep about
the oil. I don't think it would be on the table if the president hadn't put it on the table.
And what does seize their oil mean? It means we give we force them to give American oil companies preferential treatment. That's what seize the oil means, because oil is traded on international markets by corporations. So what Trump is going to do is he's going to pick and choose American corporations that get beneficial rights in Venezuela, and he's going to do that by threatening to kill the new leader of Venezuela, who's a Maduro apparatchik, by the way, his right-hand man.
Yes, but Trump is exercising.
And that's a huge opportunity
Trump
for
has Trump is exercising.
Apparatchik.
Okay.
Also a
But again,
for joke writing.
Hold on one second.
Talk slower.
1 second, guys.
The point is
let me
that
let Caroline.
You know what? Okay, can I just say
Hold on.
something?
Let me let Caroline finish her thought.
There's one word that was not mentioned anywhere, which is strategic deterrence. It's a phrase, actually, 2 words. And what this was not about oil. It wasn't about drugs. That's all side stories. It was another show, masterfully, of Trump basically showing that he can keep Iran and Russia and China and all of our adversaries at bay. He shows that he wasn't bluffing. It wasn't empty saber rattling.
The opposite is going to happen, because what clearly happened on Saturday was a message was sent, the strongmen and autocrats and dictators and our adversaries around the world, that says if you have a big army and you have a weak neighbor, or you want something from another country, you can go and take it. And nobody's going to stop you. America's not going to stop you. The rules-based order that we erected for 80 years after World War II is no longer going to stop you. It is a much more dangerous world.
So is it your position that our foreign foes should expand their foothold in South America? Is that your position?
What's crazy?
No, because what Trump did was basically said, look,
what's
guys,
actually going to happen,
you
though,
actually can't expand your influence over this region.
I don't think that's the proper extrapolation that he's making. And I don't mean to speak for you, Congressman, but what we are saying is that things like China and Taiwan, for example, what is to prevent that from just going off the rails now? Or Russia and Vladimir Zelensky?
What do you mean?
He's undermined the idea that big countries shouldn't be able to trample on small countries, because we're a big country. We just trample on small countries.
A small country with an illegitimate leader
Anyone
whose
can say
citizens are now erupting into cheers because
so your theory of the case is that
case
China was sitting there and thinking, should I take Taiwan? Oh, no, I won't take Taiwan, because I never saw Trump go in there and arrest a guy who was flooding the United States with drugs and illegals and gang members.
I would put it this
but
way.
now that he's done that, we're going to take over
arguing that our enemies are now in
I'm saying we once had a claim to the moral high ground, and now we don't.
Our adversaries are howling exactly the way that you are.
I disagree.
Russia and China and Iran are howling because they lost access to their oil.
They didn't actually lose it, but what you're saying is not true, because they actually still have the access. And there's no reason to believe that Trump's scheme the way he thinks it's going to play out that way.
You can't have it both ways, that he's both giving preferential treatment to American oil companies,
no, I'm saying he's trying
and China still has access to the oil.
He's trying to steal the oil, but he's not going to work, because
let me actually
well,
play what Trump said on Sunday
so it makes perfect
about why the oil matters, because he has been the one talking about this. This is not just made up out of thin air. Listen.
Any shipments from the oil companies?
They want to go in so badly.
Did you speak with them before the operation took place?
Yes.
Did you maybe tip them off about
Before and after. And they want to go in.
Yeah.
He said that, okay?
Yeah.
So the oil matters because Trump thinks, it seems, that this is a get-out-of-jail-free card. He said repeatedly over the weekend that this is not going to cost the United States anything because the oil is going to pay for it. Meantime, there's not a lot of indication that there's much value to the United States companies to drilling oil in Venezuela. Rather than being energized by Trump's drill, baby, drill chants at pep rallies, this is what one analyst says, the U.S. oil industry has gone into retreat. Many U.S. oil giants like Chevron, Exxon, ConocoPhillips, Occidental have been forced to lay off thousands of workers over the last year. Many producers are waiting for oil prices to increase before they raise production. So there's not really a lot of, it's supply and demand, not a lot of interest in adding more demand onto the marketplace of global oil.
I think this is the wrong issue, though.
Not if you're an oil conglomerate, but if you're the American people who want affordable energy, of course we want more production.
Hold on a second. Yes, but production isn't being done by the United States government. Production is being done by for-profit corporations who are not going to do things to reduce their profits. But
You're
Trump,
saying they don't want in,
Trump
even though they
doesn't
said they
seem
do?
to understand any of that, and this has now become one of the reasons, the principal reasons in his mind why this.
A point of clarification for Batia is that it would cost these oil companies hundreds of billions of dollars to go in and rebuild the infrastructure necessary for them to go in and refine the oil necessary for it to be used. We're talking about American companies. And so I think what we're seeing right now is Donald Trump, the president of the United States. Republicans love to sit around this table and tell me, don't believe what the president says. Like, don't believe your lying eyes, right? He tells you the reason he's doing things over and over and over again. And when I repeat them, you're like, oh, you have Trump derangement syndrome. No, I can just hear and repeat, right? But oil companies, although he says this is for oil, I articulate that this is for oil. Oil companies say that this can't be for oil because it would simply cost too much and ruin our bottom line.
I thought all these MAGA people were supposed to be against using the military to steal oil from other countries.
That
now,
to me is
he
the
tries
key
to do it and
point,
everyone
Chuck.
flips. And I actually agree
me-
with that now, and now I'm on the other side.
This
But
is
again-
the key
but
point.
all
This
the
is the
MAGA people are
conversation.
like, well, oh my God, now we got to take all their oil and we're going to kill the
we're-
president of the country if he doesn't.
We're sitting here talking about
ahead.
whether it's
Isn't that the
feasible
opposite
or
of
not,
MAGA?
whether it's
Go ahead.
feasible to do this or not, oil this, oil that. Listen, this is not the conversation that Americans are having. Americans are over it. They do not want this type of intervention. They don't want the type of nation-building quagmire that we just spent 20 years and trillions of dollars doing. We've never been good at it. We've almost always failed at it.
There's no evidence this is
and-
going
and-
to escalate into that. There's
Well,
no
there was
evidence
no
of that.
evidence in Iraq and
Points of-
Afghanistan
All
either,
right,
but we
but
have
no,
no
that
evidence
was
in our
our
history,
history,
right?
that was
All
those
right.
very
Let
different
me hit
situations.
pause on this
Very limited
conversation because
strike.
we actually have a lot more on this very topic. Tonight, the world is on notice, emboldened by the military strike in Venezuela and the capture of its leader, Nicolas Maduro. President Trump is now threatening several other countries. He's warning that they could be next.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long. Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. You have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
It's all part of Trump's bid for the Western Hemisphere dominance. But just how far is he willing to go to achieve that? Here's what his top White House advisor, Stephen Miller, had to say.
The United States is using its military to secure our interests unapologetically in our hemisphere. We're a superpower, and under President Trump, we are going to conduct ourselves as a superpower. It is absurd that we would allow a nation in our own backyard to become the supplier of resources to our adversaries, but not to us, to hoard weapons from our adversaries, to be able to be positioned as an asset against the United States rather than on behalf of the United States.
Now, just imagine that he was talking about China, and then you see Taiwan is gone.
I just said that.
By that rationale.
But then how does that make any sense, though? Because China and Iran and Russia, they just lost a strategic partner in the Venezuelan
let me explain.
dictator.
Let me
Yes, they did.
explain why
Did
it
they?
makes
Really?
sense. Let me explain why it makes sense. His rationale is we're a superpower and we can do whatever we want in our hemisphere. China says we're a superpower, we can do whatever we want. Why would we let Taiwan sell natural
Wait, you're
resources?
talking about the Iran whose nuclear facility was just neutered
I'm talking
in World
about
War III
China.
did not erupt?
I'm talking about China
the Monroe
and Taiwan.
Doctrine.
This is
I
the
didn't
triad.
say. Hold on.
This is the new axis
hold
of
on a
evil, right?
second.
They all work together. They're all in cahoots.
Hold on, Caroline. Just let's just take one at a time, okay? You're Taiwan, and suddenly China says, we're not going to let you sell chips to the United States. Why would we let you sell chips to an adversary? You're in our hemisphere. You're in our backyard. We're a superpower. We're going to just take you off the map. He seems to be laying the predicate there, Stephen Miller, since he's making policy in this White House. He's laying the predicate there for any country that sees itself as a superpower to do exactly what we just did. So how do we stop that?
But again, you're forgetting that those adversaries you just mentioned are already neutered by Trump's very strategic
China is
strikes.
neutered? How?
China's neutered because now one of its partners, Iran, is neutered because they all work together. They all collaborate
China
pretty well.
is neutered because Iran
Listen,
is neutered.
Do you think the message of this operation is that China will be empowered to attack Taiwan?
I'm just asking you to take what he said to the logical conclusion.
The logical conclusion, according to President Trump, is that he thinks we're in a new Monroe Doctrine where we control Western Hemisphere, China gets Asia, Russia gets Europe, and we split the world into three parts. Now, that makes no sense because in the 21st century, oceans are highways, not borders. But it's also a bastardization of what James Monroe must be turning in his grave right now because the whole Monroe Doctrine was about anti-intervention. It was about anti-colonialism. It was about Latin American countries being independent and sovereign.
How is this colonialism or imperialism? We don't exercise any
He said we're running the place and we're going to take their oil. That's the definition of it.
He's exercising leverage over Maduro's deputy, which is a good thing because, as you pointed out rightfully, she has a lot of skeletons in her closet and she's very much
so the point is, when China goes to the third world, they come with economic offerings and benefits and infrastructure, and we say, if you don't give us everything you got, we're going to kill you, okay? Which of those do you think is going to work over the long term?
Can we just back up?
Do you know the Colombian president's poll numbers have gone way up in the last week?
Can we back up just a little bit?
He's the most popular leader now because of what Trump did. He's actually bolstering his enemies and driving them into our enemies' arms.
Let's back up just slightly because you're right. But also one of the
That's the opposite of what he wanted to do.
But that's also one of the problems with this foreign policy that dates back. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And when we go back and we look at Elon Musk, for example, and we look at USAID, one of the problems that many people had when we talked about foreign policy was the fact that we actually had some soft power, right? We would go into these countries. We would do things like develop these programs, things that China is doing in this hemisphere that they still will be doing, things that China's doing in Africa, which we've advocated. We pulled ourselves out. So where is China growing their influence? Now, is China weaker because they lose 10% of their oil reserves? Yes. What does that have to do with the debt that our debt that China holds? Not much of anything. Is China still a superpower? Hell yeah. Will they flex their muscle against Taiwan? You bet against that if you want to. But I think we also have to look at a foreign policy that's run by tweet. We have a foreign policy that is disheveled. You all don't even have talking points about what the objectives were for kidnapping Nicolas Maduro. And the last part about it is, to your point, if Democrats have to hammer this, and stop writing these long-ass tweets and essays. He is choosing Venezuelans over Americans. He's choosing Caracas over the needs of these people, of our soybean farmers. We are actually talking about Greenland instead of inflation.
Right.
We're talking about invading other countries.
On Saturday, he said we're going to spend billions of dollars rebuilding their infrastructure, right? This is a man who campaigned largely as an isolationist, who campaigned about pulling back and ending conflict. And in the first year of his administration, we've bombed Iran, Yemen, now we've gone after Venezuela, as well as many others. I mean, this man doesn't see a problem that he doesn't think he can bomb his way out of or use the military to do. And frankly, I'm sorry, as a 3-time combat veteran in Iraq and Afghanistan, I bristle when a 5-time draft dodger bangs the war drums in Washington, D.C., because when elites bang the war drums in Washington, D.C., what happens is some young kid in a rural town in middle America, in places where I grew up, has to pick up a rifle, jump into a tank, jump into a helicopter, and do the tough thing. It's never Donald Trump. It's never people like Stephen Miller. They never have to do this the tough stuff. It's people like me and the people that I grew up with that have to do it. And America, again, is over all of this, right? They want peace. They want restraint. They want people to be smart about the use of power. Yes, they want toughness, but they want smart toughness.
Let me play a little bit more from Stephen Miller. This is where he decries that after World War II, we've been abiding by, the rules that we created after that war. Listen.
For years, we sent our soldiers to die in deserts in the Middle East to try to build them parliaments, to try to build them democracies, to try to give them more oil, to try to give them more resources. The future of the free world, Jake, depends on America being able to assert ourselves and our interests without apology. This whole period that happened after World War II, where the West began apologizing and groveling and begging and engaging in these vast reparation schemes.
I mean, it's hard to know exactly what he's talking about, but he seems to be lamenting the idea that after World War II, we created a global order in which we said, hey, countries, don't run around invading each other. Don't depose people just because you can. Why is that such a bad thing that he wants to be gotten rid of?
So again, I say this with all due respect to your service, sir, and the perspective that you bring to this table, which I truly admire. But I really think this comes down to whether, the world, that post-World War world order was working or whether it wasn't. And if you were part of the elites in America, it was really working for you. And if you were working class, it really wasn't. Look at how far China got under that rules-based order. Look at what has been done to this country. The mass migration, the fleecing of the American working class.
Before you jump in,
it all comes down to whether you think that crime and drugs and mass migration were bad and an emergency or not.
Batya, let me ask you to answer your own question. How has the United States done since World War II? How have we done?
Well, we did great until 1971.
No.
Starting in 1971,
no, seriously, answer
the
your own
elites
question.
got very wealthy,
how are we
and they
doing,
ate up 60% of the GDP.
How are we doing right now vis-a-vis the rest of the world?
I don't care about the rest of the world, Abby. I care about the American working class and the American people. I'm answering your question.
You just suggested that it was such a bad thing for the United States.
Yes.
We are
Deaths of despair.
the number one superpower in the world. We are the top
for
economy in the world.
But
we are
Abby,
the
not everybody
guarantor of
enjoys
peace
that.
in the world.
Top 10%
Hold on.
have eaten up
I understand
60%
it. Listen,
of the GDP.
income inequality is a huge problem, but there is no question, none at all, by any objective measure, that the United States was not the greatest beneficiary of the world order that we created after World War II.
Whose kid died of a fentanyl overdose,
respectfully,
Abby.
we're not asking the
sorry,
right. Respectfully, we're not asking the
great
right.
for
Batya.
everybody.
Bakari, can you just give me a second?
Sure.
Thank you. Batya.
Yes.
Listen, there is income inequality in the world. There are drug overdoses and deaths in this country that are way out of control. But we're talking about the big picture of where we were at the end of World War II and where we are today. And the United States has guaranteed peace, prosperity, and security around the world for that entire period of time. And we have done it and been the primary beneficiary, not China, but us.
I want to answer.
The question I'm asking you and Stephen Miller is, what time period exactly are we going back to? Are we talking about colonialism?
Okay.
Do we want colonies? Or we want to invade Greenland? We want to steal it from a NATO ally? We want to dissolve NATO? What are we doing?
All right. So starting in 1971, working class wages stagnated. So working class people are making around the same amount of.
You think that's because
I want to answer your very good question.
But you think that that's because after World War II, we told countries to stop invading each other?
Starting in 1965, we implemented a policy of mass migration to where the percentage of foreign-born Americans right now is higher than it's ever been in American history. That led to the disinheritance of the American working class that is very tied to our foreign policy.
So your code word, a policy of mass migration, is really what you're talking about, is that we stopped saying that only Europeans could come to the United States.
To China.
I'm just trying to decode for the Americans.
We offshored manufacturing to China.
I'm not into the euphemisms here. If you're talking about 1965 and mass migration, what you're talking about is a policy that said that you don't have to be from Europe to come to the United States. You can be a talented person, a person with potential from anywhere
Abby,
in the world.
all the immigration restrictions before that were on Europeans, like Jews who they didn't let in.
Can we go back to the
So that's not right. It's not about race at all. It's not about Europe.
It
is about the difference between being an American and not being an American. And we sold that difference out through that post-war world order. And that is why people vote for Donald Trump.
The question is wrong. The question is wrong. The question is wrong. And the reason the question is wrong, respectfully for the past conversation, is because people at this table are attempting to articulate that somehow the working class in America has had a rough go at it, right? That's your argument, the working class. My question to you is, how does a presence of America in Honduras, in Colombia, in Cuba, or in Greenland help working class Americans?
Well, I can answer it for Venezuela. Okay, well, I'll answer it for you. If the regime is more stabilized, and I just said before that we do have a large amount of leverage over Maduro's deputy, even though she still represents a communist regime. But if it's more stabilized, there will be less migration pushed by poverty. I mean, they might have a chance at prosperity now.
But you didn't even do regime change. Right? And you just articulated
what do you mean by stable? What do you mean by stable?
It's the same government.
It's Maduro's government. So what's more stable?
We have leverage over that government now because we just abducted the dictator and took him to the United States.
But you recognize that
minimal casualties to anyone.
But you recognize that the problem with the Maduro regime wasn't just Maduro, right?
The whole
it's
regime.
the whole regime.
That's why it's
It's the
called a
whole
regime.
regime that's
But you're
predicated
That's
on
right, and I agree. It's probably
oppression,
not
violence,
long-term
narco-terrorism, the
But
whole
you
thing,
want-
right?
Listen, I don't think it's long-term
Dictatorships are not
sustainable
stable.
to keep the deputy
want-
there.
you want somebody-
here's the thing.
You want somebody who-
We've already seen Maduro's deputy
But you-
say that she's going to start
But you-
possibly putting resources on the free market, maybe
But you-
implementing market reforms. That means communism could eventually end in Venezuela, which
your
means
argument-
less
Social-
migration
social-
to
Your
America,
argument-
which means less downward pressure on Americans'
So your
wages,
argument,
which means less disenfranchisement
so
of
now
the working
now
class
they're taking our
in
jobs.
America.
Okay, they're not.
Wait a minute.
But hold on, can we back up real quick?
Batia, they're
Can we
taking
back
our
up?
jobs,
Can we
right?
back up one
They're
second?
taking-
So our
This is
argument.
actually-
Well, they're
one
taking,
second,
they're not taking
one
his
second.
job.
Not
They're
your
taking
job.
working
They're
class
taking
jobs.
blue-collar
One second.
working class jobs.
So your argument,
which is very important.
your argument to the hardworking middle class American in, say, Detroit, Michigan, right now, right, who is struggling for groceries, right, whose car insurance has gone up, whose healthcare prices have gone up, who don't have access to quality care,
Yes.
whose schools are failing, is that by going into Venezuela and taking the leader and abducting him, right, then maybe actually having pressure on the regime that he had installed in Venezuela will change something in Venezuela, thereby eliminating some of the migration and migrationary pressures is going to help you survive in Detroit?
It's less competition.
Greenland, is it next? Here's Trump.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security, and Denmark is not going to be able to do it.
Tonight, some of America's strongest allies are fighting back against that.
Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark must decide the future of Greenland, and only Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark.
And Keir Starmer rules the UK, of course. Leaders in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, all NATO countries as well, also supporting Denmark and Greenland. Out front now, the Danish member of European Parliament, Anders Vistisen. Famously, when all of this started, he told Trump to F off over his threats against Greenland. And maybe that had seemed flip at the time, but now here we are. It's deadly serious. So, Anders, Trump talking about Greenland again, and you heard what he said. He said, we need Greenland. It's so strategic. We need Greenland. And this comes, hours after, he sent 200 Americans into Venezuela, captured the leader, and brought him into New York to serve trial, and now says that Donald Trump, is the one ruling Venezuela. Do you think he's really serious now about Greenland in that context?
I think the two situations are quite different from each other. When we're talking about Greenland, we're not talking about a drug-run dictatorship. We are talking about a NATO-allied country, a NATO territory that belongs to a friendly nation that is a very close ally to the USA and have been so for more than 70 years. So, of course, it is appalling, and it is very frankly stupid to continue to talk about capturing a NATO country, but we don't see it as very realistic that we have U.S. troops entering into the capital of Nuuk anytime soon. No.
One of Trump's senior aides, though, just a few moments ago, Stephen Miller, spoke out. I don't know if you heard this, Anders. So, given what you just said, I just want to play what Stephen Miller said for you.
The real question is, by what right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? What is the basis of their territorial claim? What is their basis of having Greenland as a colony of Denmark? The United States is the power of NATO. For the United States to secure the Arctic region, to protect and defend NATO and NATO interests, obviously Greenland should be part of the United States. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland.
What's your response to that, Anders?
My response is that Denmark landed on Greenland before anyone ever thought about making the United States of America. So by that logic, the United States of America should go back to be a colony of the United Kingdom. But I don't see that as a very realistic outcome. And I think again and again, we are seeing this administration talking about Greenland with no knowledge about the history of the place, with no knowledge about the fact on the ground. When Denmark sold what is today the U.S. Virgin Islands, the United States signed a treaty with Denmark 100 years ago, that we the United States of America, accepted Danish full control over the territory of Greenland. So if the United States administration is in doubt who gave us that territory, they can just go back and look into their own records and there see that it is among all the other countries in the world, the United States who have said that Greenland belonged to the territory of Greenland belonged to the Kingdom of Denmark.
So tonight, and I think that bringing up that Treaty of the Virgin Islands is fascinating, and I thank you for that. Trump is mocking Denmark's efforts on Greenland security. Here's something specific derogatory that he said. Let me play this.
You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
One more dog sled. And then Katie Miller, who obviously is married to Stephen Miller, whom I just played to you, posted that map of Greenland on social media in the colors of the American flag right after the Venezuela military operation. And the word she wrote was soon. So, you know, when Trump makes a comment like they added one more dog sled and they thought that was a great idea, and she posts that picture, obviously this is insulting. But I guess the real question, Anders, is what can Denmark do about it?
We already decided to ramp up military spending in the Arctic region significantly, many billions of Danish crowns. But let's be frank, what have America done? They have closed over 30 bases in Greenland because they didn't find it military significant to be there, to the point where there is only one American base left. So if Trump thinks that a Danish security in Greenland is ridiculous, it just goes to the point that America doesn't care about the Arctic region because they decided unilaterally to draw back from Greenland to the point where their presence in Greenland is almost non-existent. So to taunt the Danish special forces who protects Greenland is very easy, but I would like to see how many American soldiers who can cope with these Arctic temperatures and this very harsh environment. I don't think it's something that you get many soldiers to do from the American continent.
A defendant being arraigned on drug charges, gun charges, well, that's routine. But today, nothing was routine, because not every day you see something like this. The ousted leader of a foreign country crouched under the spinning blades of a helicopter, about to be perp walked before his arraignment on drug trafficking, conspiracy, weapons charges. But not in his own country, no. It was in Lower Manhattan, with the crowd gathered with conflicting protest messages right outside. It was at a federal courthouse in the country that captured him. And I was inside that courthouse watching it all play out. For the moment you stepped inside the courthouse, there were dozens of DEA agents. Uniformed armed officials were everywhere. From the moment the self-proclaimed Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro and his wife walked into the courtroom unshackled, nothing short of captivating. They were each given headphones. They were listening to an interpreter. There was a slight delay when they were responding to the judge's questions. And from the moment Maduro saw the legal pad on the desk, he began writing furiously. I'm talking turning pages, quickly filling them up. Now, he is a large man in stature. He was confident, he was imposing, he was direct, but he was respectful of the court. There weren't any outbursts. There was no fist pounding. There was no talking over anyone or the judge or any real visible annoyance. He spoke only when spoken to, but when he had the floor, that man held it. He was only asked to confirm he was indeed Nicolas Maduro, but he didn't give a yes or no answer. Instead, he said this: I am Nicolas Maduro Moras. My name is President Nicolas Maduro Moros. I am president of the Republic of Venezuela, and I am here, kidnapped, and since January 3rd, Saturday, I was captured at my home in Caracas, Venezuela. Now, the judge actually cut him off to say, let me interfere here. There'll be a time and a place to go into all of this, telling Maduro the legal questions about his capture, the motions that were going to be filed about potential immunity, all that would come at a later date. He only wanted to know his name. And shortly after Maduro gave it, he declined to have all of the charges read in length to him. Instead, he asked to read the indictment that he said he was only seeing and holding in his hands for the first time today privately. He was even advised of his right to an attorney or one would be appointed to him if he couldn't afford one, and he said he actually wasn't even aware of those rights before. And for the record, he already has Julian Assange's attorney. But the judge asked him how he wanted to plead. He said, and again, this is all in Spanish, "I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man." The whole time, he is writing. He even asked for his notes to be respected, was the word he said, seeming to suggest that they could be kept private from the gaze of the marshals and prosecution, and also to keep them with him. And the prosecutor said they would work with the marshals to make that possible. Now, meanwhile, his wife, just a lawyer away from him, she had her hands on her lap under the table. She was being directed by her attorney to read along the indictment as she seemed to nod kind of slightly. Now, Maduro, he appeared to walk with a bit of a limp. He even braced himself on the arms of his chair as he was repeatedly standing up and sitting back down to address the court whenever he was prompted. Now, Maduro's wife seemed to have her own injuries. Now, I have no idea when, how, or where she got them, but they appeared visible. She had bandages on her forehead and her right temple. She seemed to sort of nod her head occasionally. Her lawyer said there was some severe rib bruising or an injury. Her demeanor, it was a lot different from her husband. If Maduro was confident, direct, louder, well, she was more reserved. She was more soft-spoken. And Maduro, he was turning his body and straining to hear her and see her as she spoke. At one point, they exchanged glances. And she only really ever spoke, along with her attorney, after his attorney and he spoke. And she also said that she was the first lady and pleaded not guilty. Now, he spoke to his own lawyers. He spoke to her lawyers as well. And he was passing a note at one point to her lawyer and asking for responses back in his ear. But it was Maduro who provided one of the courtroom's most dramatic moments. Because at the very end of what otherwise would have been a routine arraignment of drug and conspiracy-related charges, well, there was a man inside the courtroom in the audience who stood up and called him an illegitimate president, suggesting that he would pay for what he had done in some way. And Maduro didn't just walk past. No, he looked directly at him, seemed to sort of point towards the sky to say that he was a man of God, and shot back, "I am a kidnapped president. I am a prisoner of war." That's what happened in the courtroom. But across the world, Maduro's ouster is raising all kinds of questions, like who's actually running Venezuela? Is it Venezuela's new acting president, who was just, by the way, sworn in today? Is it someone else? Because if you ask the president of the United States, he's in charge, suggesting tonight the buck, it stops with him. The buck in Venezuela, which frankly echoes what he said last night.
Dealing with the people, we're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It means we're in charge.
Have you spoken with her?
We're in charge.
Removing a foreign leader, a huge risk. But what's even riskier? Figuring out how to run a country after you've removed its leader. I want to begin with Democratic Congressman from Massachusetts, Seth Moulton, who serves on the House Armed Services Committee. He's also a Marine Corps veteran who served 4 tours in Iraq. Congressman, thank you for being here. Listen, the Gang of 8 was briefed by top Trump administration officials tonight. Congressman Jim Himes telling CNN that briefing showed, quote, he doesn't have a plan. Do you have any idea, sitting here tonight, how the President of the United States intends to run Venezuela?
No, I mean, that's a polite way to say the president doesn't have a clue. Doesn't have a clue what he's gotten into here. And it just shows the administration's priorities, that it turns out they briefed the oil companies about this operation, but they didn't brief anyone in Congress. But even more than that, Laura, they did tell us in the last several weeks that they absolutely would not do what they just did. So when they briefed us previously, and we asked this question, do you plan to put troops on the ground in Venezuela? Do you plan any ground operations in Venezuela? Are you planning operations in Venezuela and not just illegally attacking these boats off the shores? They said explicitly, no, no, no. So all along, they've been lying to Congress and to the American people.
They seem to think they have no need to tell you as Congress because there was not a declaration of war otherwise. They're also afraid of leaks. What's your response?
Well, actually, they're afraid of leaks, but it turns out that someone they told did leak this because the Washington Post and the New York Times knew about the operation in advance, but decided not to disclose it to protect our troops. They told the oil companies in advance. Maybe that's where the leaks came from. Or maybe they came from the leaker-in-chief, the commander-in-chief, who, of course, stole troves of classified documents, put them in a bathroom at his Florida beach resort. And then, of course, his Secretary of Defense disclosed classified information about future operations to his friends and family because he seemed to think it was cool and interesting. So, I mean, these are ridiculous excuses for not following the Constitution. That's the bottom line.
I want to talk about the troops specifically, and I certainly hear the claims you're making, but most Americans want to know if the president is saying that the U.S. is in charge of another country, and Stephen Miller says the U.S. is in charge due to military might, and the president saying he's not now afraid of boots on the ground. Will American service members be put there?
It certainly sounds like it. It certainly sounds like it. And let's remember that, again, every step of the way, the administration has lied and misled the Congress and the American people. So any assurance that we've received in the past that we wouldn't be putting troops on the ground is not something that we can trust. And there are a lot of troops, thousands of Marines, the last time I checked, just off the shores of Venezuela. I've been a Marine on one of those amphibious assault ships. They're infantry Marines. They're not there to intercept boats. They're not there to conduct a naval blockade. They're there to go in on the ground. So I think it's a safe assumption to say that this administration does, in fact, plan to run Venezuela. And that means American troops are going to be on the ground to do what? Not protect the sovereignty of the country. Stephen Miller doesn't believe in that. He thinks that we should just take it over. Not to protect the Venezuelan people to ensure democracy, not even to protect our national interests. It's just to protect the interests of the oil companies.
All right, well, you think Congress should have been notified. They were not. You mentioned that he's already admitted to having told the oil companies. You are a member of a co-equal branch of government. Obviously, you're talking to a lawyer, so I look at the legal system and think what can be done to stop it. But this is clearly an indication now of maybe ask for forgiveness rather than permission, because he's sitting right now, Maduro, that is, in MDC, a detention facility in the United States of America. So what can Congress do about it, if anything, now that, frankly, you weren't told and he's already here?
Look, we weren't told, and we can have a debate about exactly when we should be told. I think it's pretty clear that we should have been told. But the biggest thing, Laura, is that we were lied to. And he's lying to us in Congress. He's lying to the American people.
Okay,
it's
but
very
Congressman,
obvious
say he is.
he doesn't have a plan to come.
Say he is.
What's going to come next?
I'll give you all of that for the sake of conversation. What can you do about it now? Because obviously the bureaucratic machine of Congress and our federal system is slow compared to the pace at which our military went in and captured him and brought him to our states. So tell me, is there anything, or is Congress, are their hands tied now that the president has acted? Can you do anything about it?
No, we absolutely can. In fact, I have written the legislation that will prevent taxpayer funds from going to ground operations in Venezuela. We can vote on that this week and stop any of the hundreds of millions of dollars at this point of taxpayer funds that are not going to make your healthcare more effective or more affordable, that are not going to reduce the cost of housing, that are going to support ground troops in Venezuela. We can stop that funding, and we should have that vote. Now, will Speaker Johnson and the Republicans who run Congress allow us to have that vote? Probably not, but absolutely there's something Congress can do.
Let's talk about the State Department, because they posted on social media, this is our hemisphere, and President Trump will not allow our security to be threatened. He's also hinting, President Trump, at more U.S. action, including in places like Cuba and Colombia and Greenland. And I'm only naming a few, Congressman. What do you think the end game is here? If the indictment is about drug trafficking, narcotics, and conspiracy, destructive devices in the Venezuela matter, what do you think the end game is beyond that, given President Trump's repeated references to oil?
Well, one might say the end game is oil. I mean, that at least seems to fit with the Republican agenda, really the Republican agenda of the last 20 years. But this is why I keep coming back to this point that he's just plain lying to us and to the American people, because we don't know. We don't know. We can't believe anything that he says. There is no national security threat from Greenland to the United States. Let's be clear. There's really no national security threat from Venezuela to the United States. Is Maduro a terrible guy? Is the country a mess? Yes. Are they threatening the United States like they're going to attack the United States? Absolutely not. So he is just going to make up reasons to go anywhere. So I'm just going to throw something out there, all right? Let's just think about this for a second. We don't know exactly what his aim is, but I'll tell you one thing. We're not talking about the price of healthcare right now. We are not talking about Jeffrey Epstein. So in a lot of ways, this is just classic political playbook. When you've got some serious domestic issues, which we know Trump has, he starts a foreign war, doesn't care about putting American lives in danger, all to distract attention from the trouble that he's in at home. That's the best guess I have about what's going on here.
Quickly, Congressman, many people have criticized Democrats for criticizing tactics, but agreeing with an underlying policy. You have said that Maduro is, to paraphrase you, not an appropriate, not a good person, not a good leader. Would you have agreed with his removal if the tactic by Trump had been different?
No, we can all want Maduro to be gone. I mean, I want Putin to be gone too. But that doesn't mean that we should fly into Moscow and take out Putin. I mean, it's just wrong. It's illegal. And most importantly, it's not in our national interest. It's not in the national security of the interest of the United States. It is not worth risking American lives to do. Sure, Trump got lucky here. That's great. But at some point, Americans are going to get killed because of these shenanigans. And if it's just to distract attention from the stuff he's got going on at home, that's not illegal. It's completely immoral, and the American people should not stand for it.
America and the Western Hemisphere is safer tonight.
The United States has an absolute legal right to go and arrest people charged with horrible crimes, including narco-terrorism. What we did was not only right and not only legal, but it's what the American people expect us to do when we file charges against individuals like him.
Well, there you have it. The top two leaders of the DOJ showing a united front in their case against Nicolas Maduro. And of course, his wife, as the ousted Venezuelan leader, insists he is a prisoner of war, unquote, not a criminal defendant. There's some pretty thorny legal questions about his arrest and the future of this case. Here to answer some of those questions, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Greg Rosen. Good to see you, Greg. I got to tell you, I'm outside the courthouse today, and somebody shouts out, "Coach, legal or illegal?" That about sums up the big question people have with respect to what transpired here. Greg, all eyes are on the 1989 memo from the former AG, Bill Barr. And in it, it stated the FBI could go into a country, they could arrest someone under criminal indictment and bring them back to the United States. And you know what? Bill Barr addressed this recently and said it also applies to Maduro. Listen.
The Supreme Court has been clear. It doesn't matter how he got here. Once he's in front of the court and he's been charged, he stands trial and can be convicted.
Okay. Sound legal opinion? What do you think?
Hey, Laura. Nice to be here. I think legally he's correct. You know, there's going to be a difference, obviously, in this upcoming trial and in this litigation between the body, Maduro and his wife, being in the United States, being subjected to the jurisdiction of the United States. And I think there's a doctrine called the Kerr-Frisbee doctrine. There's some legal case law that's born out of the Manuel Noriega prosecution that pretty much says what Attorney General Barr said, which is that the body's here in the United States, the prosecution can go forward.
So translation, even if there is some issue with having him brought here, it doesn't erase the indictment that frankly has been years in the making. It might delay something else in some way?
Yeah, so it won't erase the indictment and it won't erase the prosecution or the ability of the government to prosecute. But there are some thorny issues here, right? You're going to be dealing with some of the legal issues that deal with the legality of the actual seizure of Nicolas Maduro. You're going to be dealing with head of state immunity. You're going to be dealing with prisoner of war conditions, as he so claimed in court. You know, those are the things that are going to sort of complicate the picture, coupled with the factual narrative, exactly how this all transpired. So that doesn't mean it's going to bar the prosecution, but it is going to present some complicated issues.
And by the way, in court today, they did not move for bail to be released pending trial. They said they're going to stay or waive their right to a speedy trial until March 17th to try to flush out some of the very things you are talking about, including discovery and other things. But everyone keeps going back to the reference to Manuel Noriega. You say that that case was easier possibly to pursue than this one. What makes it harder in this case?
So, right, as a backstop, Manuel Noriega was prosecuted in the Southern District of Florida, and that was for narco trafficking, what they call narcotics trafficking. This is a little bit different because this deals with designation of foreign terrorist organizations, and in fact, the designation of foreign terrorist organizations that occurred post-2020, which proceeds, or was after the original 2020 indictment of Nicolas Maduro. And so I think there's some complicated legal issues with respect to subsection 960A. I also think there's going to be huge factual differences. In the case of Noriega, there was an armed conflict where there was actually a declaration of war by the Panamanian Assembly, which prompted and eventually resulted in a death of a service member, in which President Bush then went in and used force in Panama. That's a little bit different than this scenario where you don't have armed conflict that precedes it. You also don't have the same factual predicate of the Panamanian leader, Manuel Noriega, was no longer president at the time that he was captured, whereas here, the government tries really hard, and you see that in the indictment, calling him the illegitimate but de facto ruler of Venezuela, but there was no alternative ruler. The State Department, the government never designated anybody else. And so since 2019, the United States hasn't recognized Maduro, but that's going to complicate whether or not he actually can avail himself of head of state immunity, which is something that was rejected in the Noriega case.
That would be fascinating to see how that all unfolds. But also the way this case is going to operate. I mean, the government has been compiling like 25 years worth of alleged evidence. You're talking about classified material as well. How are the courts going to navigate? It will be a kind of a filter team in place. I should note, Maduro's attorney is Julian Assange's attorney as well. So certainly he is accustomed to the idea of classified information. But what's it going to be like to try to go through this and have an expedited or even a timely trial?
I think it's highly unlikely you're going to see an expedited trial in this case. The Classified Information Procedures Act, also known as CIPA, is what's going to guide this litigation. And what's going to happen is they're going to be dealing with different subsections of CIPA to determine whether or not, first, there's discoverable material in the holdings of the United States, of any law enforcement or intelligence agency that has any connection with this case. So think about, over the course of 20 years, potentially the covert or overt materials that the government has obtained, to include communications of, let's say, Nicolas Maduro and leaders of China, Russia, Cuba, Iran. Those are the types of things that we're talking about during the course of CIPA litigation. And Nicolas Maduro's counsel, Barry Pollock, is likely going to seek additional discovery that anything that goes to undercut the intent or knowledge of his client vis-a-vis those charges is going to be Brady material, constitutional material that needs to be turned over. It doesn't matter if it's classified. CIPA deals with the procedures on how to deal with classified information. That's going to make this one of the most complicated features of this prosecution.
And of course, you wonder if the co-defendants, husband and wife, will now remain together for those very reasons. So much to unpack. Something tells me this is not a 2026 trial, Greg Rosen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Breaking tonight, there are new reports of chaos in Caracas, Venezuela, as gunfire erupts near the presidential palace. Gunshots and anti-aircraft fire pierced the tense calm that was apparently there. The question is, what caused it? Well, apparently a misunderstanding between paramilitary groups tied to the regime. Conversations heard by CNN suggest there was a drone flying overhead that sparked the gunfire. Venezuela's communications ministry says the drones were flying without permission. Now, the White House says it's tracking the reports, but adds, quote, the U.S. is not involved. The city is now calm, but it's clear that Venezuela is on edge as it heads down quite the uncertain path. And I'll talk about all of that and what might be next for Venezuela with military expert and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, Alex Plitzis. Alex, thank you so much for being here as we're unpacking what is before Venezuela, frankly, and the rest of the globe. Talk to me about what those potential paths forward might even look like for Venezuela. Now, we know President says that he is in charge, but what is the best case scenario here?
So the best case scenario would be a peaceful transition from what seems to be a regime official at this point. So the vice president of Venezuela, who was also illegitimately elected with Maduro, is in charge right now. So what we're hearing is that the Venezuelan Supreme Court has verified that she is for all intents and purposes, the acting president at the moment, since Maduro is here in New York, facing trial. You're obviously in court today. And it was kind of unclear as to whether or not there was coordination with the administration ahead of time. Mm-hmm. But what came across was interesting comments from the president. So the first question posed was, well, what about Machado? Could she take over the opposition leader?
The Nobel Peace Prize winner, I should mention as well.
Precisely, and who was, the opposition overwhelmingly elected by the people. The president said, well, she doesn't have the gravitas or the authority or whatnot within the country to take over. And he said, well, I think, the Venezuela has a vice president. So it was kind of alluded to that he had some sort of briefing, somebody was coming, but it wasn't clear that a decision had been made. Then there was a defiant comment from her, a few hours later that we're not going to, we want our president back. This is illegal and everything else. And then the next
Delcy
day,
Rodriguez is talking about the interim.
Yes, yes. And then 24 hours later, mysteriously, after she's in charge as a cabinet meeting, said, well, we're willing to work with the U.S. on an agenda to get there.
So can we trust her?
I don't think she knows where everything's at the moment, and that's because we saw a video where she was then embracing the Chinese ambassador, the Russian ambassador, the Iranian ambassador, and I think until this sort of gets sorted out, she's trying to figure out where to turn. So I think they're trying to avoid future military action from the United States, but at the same time, I don't think they want to cut off lifelines to the access that kept the Maduro regime alive, which is obviously Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, et cetera.
I got to play this sound that came out from tonight. Actually, Maria Corina Machado was actually on Fox News this evening. Listen to what she had to say.
Did you at any point offer to give him the Nobel Peace Prize? Did that actually happen? I had read that somewhere. I wasn't sure if it was true.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but I certainly would love to be able to personally tell him that we believe the Venezuelan people, because this is a prize of the Venezuelan people, certainly want to give it to him and share it with him. What he has done, as I said, is historic. It's a huge step towards a democratic transition.
It seemed to me she was a little bit caught off guard by the precision of that question, but is that somehow going to be persuasive in terms of whether she would take power?
Well, I think there were some comments that were made about whether or not President Trump didn't like her because she got the Nobel Prize that he was actively seeking this year. But I did speak to some folks in the intelligence community today, both at CIA and a couple other agencies, and they did confirm that there was an assessment made that the agency, I guess, determined that trying to hand, in this situation, control of the country over to the opposition when we weren't going to send in ground forces from the beginning, and you can't really do regime change from the air, how were they going to unseat a government that was there? And so for a transition period, there was a determination made by the intelligence community, or at least advice to the administration, that they should probably select somebody from the sitting regime, but that's against the will of the Venezuelan people.
Listen to what Secretary Hegseth had to say about how this all played out. And it was stunning to think of how little notice Maduro even had that they were at his front steps. Listen to this.
He didn't know they were coming until 3 minutes before they arrived. In fact, his wife said, I think I hear aircraft outside. They didn't know. You know why? Because every single part of that chain did their job. And they did it flawlessly.
200 personnel from the U.S. took part in the raid and somehow. Tell me a little bit about this planning. It seemed to be meticulous, but also there were fatalities around Maduro's Cuban guards. No U.S. troops were killed. Walk me through how this all was carried out.
Sure. So the preparation and planning for the raid began several months ago. So the decision that this was going to be the course of action that was presented to the president has gone back at least 2, if not 3 months. Just like in the bin Laden raid, the intelligence community and Special Operations Command, they built a full mock-up of the compound. And so you'll have, within the intelligence community, engineers and folks with that background who can actually look at a building from the outside, having human source on the inside, and determine how it was constructed. Even the materials are almost similar, or should be, so that it's as real as possible. And so for many months, a squadron from the U.S. Army's Delta Force was training on the compound. And then it became clear that the path that they chose to pursue for the operation was to execute a warrant for Maduro, tied back to those indictments in 2020, the superseding indictment released by the Attorney General shortly after his capture. And so to do so, what became commonplace during the global war on terror is to have FBI special agents from the hostage recovery team, HRT, which was stood up in the 80s after Reagan sent Delta Force in the prison in Atlanta. When there was an uprising, they realized there was issues with posse comitatus, and they needed a domestic force to be able to do similar types of things, and the FBI stood up this capability. So some of those agents were attached, and all of them came in then via helicopter. So they trained for many months on the compound. They even brought torches to the compound, to be able to actually weld open the doors if they had to, if he got in the safe room.
Unbelievable. Thank you so much, Alex Plesis. We'll learn more, I'm sure, maybe in the days, perhaps months to come. Thank you. I want to dig into the political fallout, and there is political fallout, with Ben Ferguson, host of The Ben Ferguson Show and co-host of Verdict with Ted Cruz. Also here, Joe Walsh, former Republican congressman turned Trump critic and Democrat, and director of The Social Contract. Thank you both for being here. I want to begin with you, Ben, because there have been many pro-MAGA lawmakers who are actually calling out the president over Venezuela, like the outgoing congresswoman in about, 30 minutes or so, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Listen to this.
I unapologetically support America first. And as an American, it's okay to disagree with the president that I helped get elected, and it's okay to disagree with other Americans. But what's not okay is for our government to put their full focus on foreign countries.
Does she have a point, or is she missing the forest through the trees?
Yeah, I think she's just trying to stay on TV for the last 35 minutes of her career before her pension she gets. And she's obviously not looking at all the other issues that the president's dealing with the United States of America. We've got a lot going on here. It also doesn't mean that the president doesn't have an obligation, a duty to keep us safe. And we know how many Americans have been killed because of narco trafficking and drug trafficking coming in from Venezuela. The president was very clear. He gave multiple off-ramps. Maduro chose not to do that. And now he's sitting in a jail cell in the United States of America in the same basically vicinity of where you are right now, or I should say in New York, where a lot of the staff is. And I think this is the point that the president has made clear. If you are causing harm, whether you're in Colombia, whether you're in Mexico, whether you're in Venezuela, and you're killing innocent Americans with drugs, and we declare that you are a terrorist organization, we will come after you. We will hunt you down. We will find you. We will bring you to justice. And there's far too many Americans have died, unfortunately, from fentanyl overdose. I know some personally. If you've ever sat with family members, they talk about this. There are a lot of innocent people that had no intent on dying, and they die because of a fake pill because of guys like this. He deserves what he gets.
Well, Joe, what's your response to all of that?
Respectfully, this didn't have anything to do with drugs. I think that went out the window a long, long time ago. I mean, the former head of Honduras, just a bigger drug pin than Maduro, just got a big old pardon from Donald Trump. Look, on Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's right. I mean, and I'm not America first, but America first is not about regime change, and it's not about invading other countries and then taking over that country's economy. Laura, right now, Lindsey Graham is like over the moon excited with what Donald Trump is doing. Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't support it. Lindsey Graham is not America first. He was the antithesis of this. I don't think it will matter because the support for Trump will be there because it is adoration of him and it's not really issues based.
There have been some, though, Ben, on both sides of the aisle who confirm and believe that Maduro is an illegitimate leader, that he is not, as he said, a decent man in court. But there is a lot of disagreement on the tactic employed because, frankly, you've given us a list of several countries There are other countries to which there is that shared opinion that President Trump has not overseen or, confirmed this sort of behavior and this operation. Do you have a sense as to why Venezuela and not other countries engaged in behavior that has a harmful effect either on Americans, on democracy, on illegitimacy? Why Venezuela? Because many just think it's oil. What do you think?
I think it's a couple of different reasons. Number one, this is as bipartisan as it gets. Even Joe Biden said that he was the illegitimate leader of the country. We have not, as a nation, since the beginning of his administration, the end of the Trump administration, said that Maduro was the leader of this country when he stole that election. That's number one. Number two, there's a national security issue here from the drugs and the cartels. Number three, there is also a national security issue from China, Iran, and others that want to get into Venezuela, and they have proximity to our country. When you look at nuclear weapons, it's a 30-minute strike from Venezuela. It is very clear that Iran and China and Russia wanted to have a major cooperation with Maduro, and we're helping him by buying his oil. We know this as a fact. In fact, we were warned about it by Chuck Schumer, who warned us from the floor of the United States Senate. In his own words. In fact, he mocked Donald Trump at the end of his administration the first time and said, you haven't done enough to take him out. You haven't done enough to go after him. Well, now it's been done. So it doesn't get any more bipartisan than this. So now you're just dealing with hypocrisy. That's all this is.
Let me ask you, Joe. Hold on, Ben. Let me ask.
I hear you from the floor of the Senate.
Do you hear me, Ben? Hold on. Joe,
yeah,
I'm going to ask you what your reaction is, because Congressman Ro Khanna has been calling out Democrats for not speaking out more, calling the silence from some 2028 frontrunners shocking. There's been questions about the underlying agreement that Maduro is a bad guy, but also frustration with the tactic that has been used. Instead, how do Democrats criticize the operation without looking like they are taking the side of a dictator?
Laura, I'll combine both of your questions. It is about why Venezuela. It's oil. It's oil. It's oil. It's oil. Look, Ben, I would assume would believe what the president of the United States said. Donald Trump said, why Venezuela? The oil. Stephen Miller went on this network earlier today and said, we invaded the country. We invaded it militarily. We took over their natural resources. Again, I think Ro Khanna's right, Laura, that how do you go after this? Donald Trump cares more about Venezuelan oil than he does about problems here in America. I think that will resonate with voters.
So remember this controversial video that drew fierce backlash from the White House, where lawmakers told service members that they could disobey or not follow illegal orders? Well, tonight, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is taking steps to punish one of those lawmakers you see in that video, Arizona Senator and retired Navy Captain Mark Kelly, launching proceedings aimed at reducing Kelly's retired military rank, which would in turn cut his retirement pay, even threatening criminal prosecution should Kelly continue to speak out. But just hours ago, Kelly made it clear he has no intention of backing down.
I'm never going to back down from these guys. I'm going to continue to speak out. I'm going to continue to do my job. And as much as I can, highlight how wrong these people are and how outrageous this is and how dangerous. So I'm not going away.
Well, joining me now is Paul Rieckhoff. He is the founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America and the host of the podcast, Independent Americans. Paul, glad you're here, because I want to read a part of Hegseth's central letter to Kelly, where he justifies this move, saying, quote, your conduct